Hello everyone and welcome to your introductory project. Today we're going to be starting with our very first step here as a Unity coding student. What we need to do is start to set up our player so that we can actually play our game. So you might be thinking, well, what even is a player in Unity? How are these things set up for us to be able to move around, jump around, and press buttons and have things happen in the game? Well, what you'll need to know is that our player is what's going to be called a game object. And most of the things in our game are actually going to be what are called game objects. Game objects are essentially a container for what are called components. So to break this down, let's go ahead and select our alien game object here in the hierarchy. Anything listed here is going to be the game object that we're working with. So pretty much everything in our world is made out of game objects. But if we select our alien, in the right side of our screen in the inspector, you'll see a list of what are called components. So every game object in Unity is made up of a bunch of different components that allow us to define what the game object is and does in our game. Every single game object has this transform component. This tells our game object where it is in the world, how it's rotated in the world, and how big it is in the world. Each of these is representative of those gizmo tools that we went over in the intro video. So again, the position we get by selecting our object, and in the scene view, which again you can navigate in the scene view by holding right click with your mouse in the scene view window. We can see the movement gizmo is our three arrows here, and that will change the position values on our transform component. Pressing the E key brings up the rotation gizmo, which changes our rotation values in the transform component. Pressing the R key brings up the scaling gizmo, which, as you might have guessed, changes our scaling numbers on our transform component here as well. So in order for our player alien here to actually move around, we need to add a component that's going to control our player's movement. Unity has some components built in and some that we create. So the first one that we want to add is one that Unity provides for us. This is called the character controller. To add a component in the inspector on the right side, there's a button that says add component. You simply click on that, and in the search bar that appears at the top here, we'll type the name of the component we want to add. Again, in this case, that is the character controller. So we will type character controller, and you'll see that appear here in the list. We're going to click on this, and then Unity will automatically attach the component to our list of components on the alien game object. This character controller component is going to be what actually moves our player for us. We'll write some code to tell it when and where to move us, but this character controller has a bunch of built-in code that allows us to move our player. Anything that you see on a component that has this little box with text in it, or maybe in the case of like the animator, it has objects it's referring to, these are called fields. Fields are going to be where we can edit the properties or values of things associated with the code in our component. So for example, on our character controller component, there is a limit to how big of a slope we allow our character to move up. So for example, if we look back in our scene view, the first place the player is able to move is up this slope to the left. So the slope limit, if it was set to a low value, say 0, the highest slope our player would be able to walk up is flat ground. So 45 tells our character controller that a slope that has a 45-degree angle to the ground is how high of an angle we can walk up. Each of these fields here have some sort of thing to do with our character controller. Step offset determines how high of a step our player can move up. Skin width determines how wide the skin of our capsule collider is. And actually, if I move my scene view close here, you can see this little green outline of a capsule surrounding our player. In this case, we actually will have two of those. Our player component, and then on the lower part is the capsule component. In order to correct that, what we need to do is, as you can see, it's actually sticking into the ground. So we're going to change the center field here to a value of 1. So we have X, Y, and Z components. Just like with our transform, those correlate to the X, Y, and Z axes in our world. So X is left and right, Z is forward and back, and Y is up and down. We want to move it up, so we're going to set the Y value to 1. And you'll see it pops into place and overlaps with our actual capsule collider up there. If we wanted to make it taller to match our player, we could adjust the height. But again, anything that we adjust on the height is going to make our capsule stick back into the ground, so we'd have to adjust our Y value accordingly. You can do that by either entering the number you want right directly into the Y value, or you can click on the Y button and drag to the left or right to move it up or down. I'm going to keep mine with a height of 2 and a Y position of 1. Because we're not really going to be anywhere in this game that our head would be maybe touching something or blocking us from moving into somewhere. So feel free to experiment with these values on your character controller, though you won't actually be able to notice them until we get into the next step.